Hey, good evening, Internet peoples. Tonight, we're bringing you a very special episode number 40 of Kenter at Your Own Risk, with Kent and Kevin and Chris. Tonight, we will be discussing in-depth, or maybe not all the way in-depth, the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, maybe going into some of the documentaries around it. I don't know, we'll see how long it takes, but going through the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the whole main series, New Nightmare, Freddy vs. Jason, and then the reboot. So quickly, before we get to that, how are you guys doing? Kent, I just want to say I got the gift you sent me the other day. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and it's always a pleasure to do these things with you, man.
You're welcome. Okay, so, I mean, in full disclosure, I was looking for something completely different, and all of a sudden, you know, like when you're on Amazon, you get those, like, things you may like, and also I'm like, oh, there's a dragon-shaped coaster set. That seems kind of cool. Is it decent quality? Like, it looked okay from the pictures, but you can never quite tell.
Oh, it's nice, man. And my wife was laughing. She's like, you never use coasters? I'm like, well, I never had a coaster set before.
That's right.
I've used it every day since I got it. So
wonderful.
There you go.
All right. I just feel like saying, since I know her name will get brought up later on, I missed out on a night of playing The Quarry starring Lin Shaye to do this podcast. So missing Lin Shaye to do something else with Lin Shaye, it feels appropriate for me.
Several Lin Shays.
Yeah. So that's my update.
Kevin, how about you? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks again for having me. This has been a long 2 weeks of new Nightmare on Elm Street.
And like I was telling these guys before we started, the most amazing thing is I haven't had a single nightmare about Freddy in the whole thing. Rewatching all of these. You know, probably when I was a kid, outside of Facehuggers, he was the most person likely to show up in my nightmares. I don't...
Really?
I never watched the movies when I was young, so it was always, that kind of thing where, like, you know what he is, you've seen him, but you always make shit up worse for yourself than it actually, so...
Theater of the mind.
Exactly.
Right there,
like, he was way more smart and cunning and sadistic in my dreams than he was in any of these movies.
Yeah, that seems fair. I haven't had a Freddy nightmare maybe since like my teenage years or something, and even then, they were usually more funny Freddy. Like, yeah, he's still a dick, but he's also kind of made me laugh, so I was okay with it, I guess.
You remember when we had the cookie club at Price Chopper? You'd get that cookie on your... Yeah, I had a dream where he put, his razor blades inside the free cookie he gave me as a... Yeah.
That bastard. Those cookies were great, too.
They were, too.
Kevin, did you used to get in on the cookie club?
No, I don't. I don't think I know the cookie club. But
you could go to the bakery in Price Chopper and they'd give you a free cookie on your birthday.
Oh. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Well...
I've had a nightmare from Freddy since I was probably 12 or so. Like, when I saw Freddy, I don't remember the first time that I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, but not to jump ahead, but I believed in Santa Claus, when Freddy Krueger, came into my peripheral, so he was very scary as a child.
So, out of curiosity, just a question for both of you. Which one was your first Nightmare on Elm Street? Did you guys see the first one as your first nightmare? Because for me, it was Nightmare 3.
My whole first Nightmare on Elm Street was a fucking great day. I was 18, and I remember I went to it was one of the scariest days in my life in regards to shit I watched. Before I had it spoiled for me, I remember I went to the theater in the afternoon with my mom and we saw The Sixth Sense. And so, The Sixth Sense now, it's like fucking nothing. But, the way they were advertising it and playing it up, before everybody knew what the fucking secret, the twist was, they tried to sell it as like a horror movie. And then I came back, and I don't remember who I went with because Jay was at home watching movies with somebody else. Maybe it was Eric, but I went with somebody, and we saw, like 2 hours later, I saw The Blair Witch Project. And that hadn't been spoiled for me yet either. And then, as I was getting home from The Blair Witch Project, Jay and whoever were hanging out at my house were watching, and A Nightmare on Elm Street was just starting, and I just sat down and watched that, and I was just scared as shit by the time I went to bed between The Blair Witch Project and then Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time.
That's a hell of a day. And a day you can't ever really recreate because avoiding spoilers is next to impossible now.
I don't even try if it's something I'm interested in. Unless, like, there are a couple book series I read, I'll completely avoid spoilers for them because I read fast enough that, like, the day that it comes out, I'm done with the book. But outside of that, I don't try.
Yeah, fair enough. Kevin, do you remember your first Nightmare on Elm Street experience?
I think it was Freddy's Revenge. And I watched it. My cousin Tim had it on Betamax. And I knew who Freddy Krueger was at that time. And this was around the time, because I remember watching The Last Boy Scout. So this was like 92, 91 or 92. So I was around like 10 years old. When I saw it, I might have been a little bit younger, but my cousin Tim had, his dad, my Uncle Ken, had all of these Betamax tapes, and that one I remember most of, and the only reason I remember that it is because it has that opening bus scene, and riding the bus was, I was on the bus for like an hour, like on my way home from school every day, so that was some real shit for me.
Oh, Jesus, yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So you said your first one was 3, Kent?
Yeah, my neighbor across the street, he had at least 5 years on me, so I don't know, I think I was like 9, and he was, in his early, maybe even like mid-teens probably. So like he had his porn mag stash, and he was into horror, so like when his mom wasn't home, he'd have me come over and show me shit. So one day he happened to just show me Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and I'd heard the hype. It was just one of those things that my mom never bothered to rent for me. I don't know why. She had her choice in horror to rent for me, and that just wasn't on the list. So I got to see it, and I was just absolutely hooked after that. So it was truly love at first sight from a movie perspective. So.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. So we're just going to go chronologically, right?
I think that makes the most sense. Okay.
So we'll start off with the original Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. Like I said, the original time I saw this was would have been 1998 because I was 18. I watched it a couple years within the last couple of years. Whenever we did the last one where we talked about it, I don't remember which particular podcast it was that we spoke about it, Kent.
Oh gosh, it probably been a good year ago, I would guess.
Yeah,
right?
So I mean, I had watched it recently, but not within the last couple months or. Maybe, I don't know, whatever it was.
Hell, I just watched all of this in October, so I just rewatched it all again, 3 months later?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that really sticks with me for this movie is, for the most part, how subtle it is compared to a lot of other horror movies. You have, 3.5 kills in the entire movie?
Gosh, yes, 3.5 sounds exactly on point.
Well, because depending upon which version you watch, it's hard to figure out what exactly happens with the mother at the end.
Yeah, that's open for. Actually, a lot of it's open to interpretation, I guess. But yes, I would say I would agree with 3.5 if I had to throw out a number.
So, I mean, compare that to, like, the beginning of The Collection, where you literally have, 120 people just getting murked by one trap that the dude sets up? Or the beginning of something like Ghost Ship. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it pales a little bit in comparison, which, it's kind of funny because, okay, so we just recently had Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, and I binge-watched 3 through 9 in 2 days, and, each one of those movies has, we'll say, close to, 10 kills per movie. Nightmare on Elm Street was typically, about half of that, or even less than half that. It wasn't... kill quantity wasn't the thing, it was kill quality.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, which is going to be a reoccurring theme throughout the whole thing, but I did not remember how fucking clumsy Freddy Krueger is as a fucking, killer. With the exception of Ghostface, he's probably the fucking clumsiest, slasher killer out there. If somebody threw a cardboard box or a pallet or a trash can or a dirty hamper of laundry, he was tripping over that fucking shit.
It's a shame that there's not a video on YouTube of Freddy or Ghostface getting, fought off and yakety sax playing in the background. That's really what I need.
I really... Those were two of the things that really stuck out with me when I watched this first one. And, the second, as I went through, I was like, holy shit, he is fucking clumsy as fuck over the... he seemed much more menacing in my memory, like we were just talking about before, than he actually is in a lot of the scenes in the movies until, they decide that he's going to go in for the kill. But in case you've never seen it before, teenagers who live on a street called Elm Street in, is it Springfield? Is it Ohio?
Springwood.
And when do we actually find out it's Ohio?
Oh, gosh. I know definitely know that in 6, but do we find out before then?
Oh, it's a really good question. It's one of those things I just feel like I just know.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
They talk about it in documentaries, but by then it's a documentary. I don't know, but you specifically see in Freddy's Dead, you see it on the map. Whether they say Ohio prior to that, I don't really know.
I kind of think there was one of, a mention, maybe in 3 or 5?
Something on the radio, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I could see that.
Or in maybe one of the newspaper articles, when they were researching Amanda in 5.
That would also make some sense.
Anyways, these teens are having a dream of this guy with a gloved, clawed hand. He's all burnt up, and he wears a green and red sweater with a brown hat. And he goes around and he kills them in their dreams. And when they die in their dreams, they're dead in real life. That's the basic gist of the whole thing. Sometimes we find out his backstory that Freddy was a child murderer. Later on, they recap it to change it to being a child molester, just in the remake. Sometimes he was a janitor at the school. Sometimes he worked in a nearby power plant. Sometimes he was a gardener. I don't know why there's all the discrepancies within the main series. Probably because of the fact that we had different directors, and I think different writers.
I think they all are written by someone different, outside of the written and directed by Wes Craven ones.
Yeah,
original.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd kind of forgotten that the whole power plant thing. I always, I in my mind, I liked just thinking he was worked in the school, and had access to the boiler room. So in my mind, Freddy's always just going to be a school janitor. That's just my take on it.
That's what I remembered. I didn't remember any of the the little changes like that. But to be fair, For the power plant, it had been a long time, like years and years and years since I had seen 2.
Sure.
Robert Englund, of course, in all of them except for the reboot, played Freddy Krueger, and I would say he's probably, if not number 1, then within the top 2 or 3 most iconic horror icons in the entire genre of horror films.
I feel that's a podcast coming, and I already made my list.
That would be a cool one.
And yes, Freddy is my number 1 because, some people can relate better to Jason. They're like the strong, silent type. Some people like Michael for some lame-ass reason. I'll never quite understand it. And some people prefer a little bit of comedy and sadistic nature. And then, every once in a while you'll get somebody else that has, younger people especially, they don't have the same sentimental attachment that, we do.
Yeah. I mean, I would hesitate to say that's exactly the same, but I mean, between his look, the glove, and the nursery rhyme, I mean, all of that really, I think, serves to cement him in the top. I mean, I don't think anybody could argue that the top 3 are probably Freddy, Jason, and Michael.
Yeah, I think if you did like a poll of 1,000 people, those would be your top 3.
Pinhead.
Some votes for Chucky, some votes for Ghostface, maybe Pinhead. Yeah, there's a lot. Of those people.
I mean, you probably have individuals who are more, like iconic, but they've been portrayed in so many, like Dracula. How many different ways has Dracula been portrayed? Within the movies, from Bela Lugosi to Christopher Lee to Gary Oldman to Gerard Butler to Nicolas Cage coming up. I mean, there's so many different. There's no one like iconic version of Dracula. Frankenstein's probably a little closer, but I don't. Frankenstein. How many people are really scared of Frankenstein's monster? Yeah, I mean, now
right.
Compared to, back when it was released in the 1920s.
I'll toss another name out there that's always going to be on a top 10. Like, if this person doesn't make your top 10, I don't trust your opinion, and that'd be Jack Torrance. I feel like he's a mandatory top 10 horror icon.
I mean, I think he's important, but he's literally, one movie. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. But in the horror genre, if you say quality of film, it's arguably of one of the highest quality films. So I think plus everybody just kind of knows his shit. That I think.
Yeah, but I think if
everybody knows.
if you asked kids today who would never watch The Shining, what here's
right
where it came from, they'd be like, I don't fucking know. I mean, even though everybody knows that as a reference from so many takeoffs on it.
I guess that's also kind of important, is the amount of times it's been like copied or parodied or whatever. But you're like, once again, we are getting to this age where we do kind of take it for granted that there are teenagers that straight up they don't even know who the fuck Leprechaun is. Perhaps.
Lucky Charms? What's?
Yeah, it's very confusing. I mean, they wouldn't have known who the fuck Chucky was until, they had the reboot a few years ago, and now they got the TV series, but, Child's Play was kind of, not dormant, but it was quiet for a long time. So, yeah, there's a whole generation that I have no idea who they even are into nowadays. Hopefully they gravitated towards the new Candyman. I enjoyed that film, but, they may not have. I assume Ghostface might still be popular, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's
not as popular as, like, Halloween is because of that new series, because that's the movie, like, teenagers go, like, that movie did really well, and so did the new Scream, but, like, Halloween Ends did really well financially. And all 3 of them did, and that's pretty impressive.
And Jason's on the verge of making a comeback when that series hits on Peacock, I think it's getting put on. the Crystal Lake.
Oh, Crystal Lake, yeah.
So he'll make a comeback. So it's only time. Time will tell. But I'm sure we are getting way off topic already. We're doing great.
Anyways, yeah, I mean, I don't. We've gone into this one before. I mean, we should probably get Kevin's opinions, but it's
probably
early appearance, if not his first appearance, by Johnny Depp in a movie. Again, Robert Englund killed it as Freddy. John Saxon, I always loved seeing him ever since I saw, Enter the Dragon and realized he was, a disciple of Bruce Lee. To circle back to what we were talking about earlier, Lynn Shay is one of the teachers in the high school in this first one. Heather Langenkamp, she didn't, at least I haven't seen a ton of shit that she did, but she's having kind of a resurgence lately. Well, she was
in
with
Shocker.
With
she was in Shocker.
She was in Shocker. Yeah, it wasn't a very big part, but yeah, she was in Shocker.
She did that series for Mike Flanagan before he got signed over to Amazon from Netflix. The Midnight Club.
Midnight, yeah.
And it was kind of cool because the kids were telling ghost stories to kind of like pass the time while they're dying, and she was a different character in each one of the stories besides also being the head administrator and nurse of the hospice that they're in. So she got to play like 10 different characters over the course of the series.
That's cool. I mean, I've always liked her. It's just, she I don't know if she got typecast or whatever. I mean, most horror scream queens tend to get typecast. So, but I don't know if I ever... Here's a question. Did either of you guys ever consider her to be a scream queen? Because I never did.
I didn't really because, like I said, I hadn't seen her in enough stuff. But, because it was so long between when I watched like the whole series, I completely forgot that she was in 3. I remember that she was in New Nightmare because that was one of the ones that... Did we do that for the blog? I mean, before we started doing the podcast?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, so that was a while back. But, yes, I remember that she was in the remake of that. But, I think there's, typecast partially, especially in the 80s. And then there were a lot of people who weren't necessarily picked for their acting ability, but maybe because of their appearance or just what they were asking price-wise. I don't know.
Depp was cast for his appearance. Well, I believe it was Wes Craven's daughter, insisted that he was in the movie.
Beautiful.
Worked out for him.
Yeah. So, yeah. All right. I'll throw a question out here. Since I'm always kind of baffled, I hear that, it was a big get for them to have Ronnie Blakely play Marge Thompson, Nancy's mom. And yet, when I watch her performance, I can't tell if it's her performing badly, if it's how the character's written, but something about the first half of the movie and her performance is beyond wooden to me. Is it intentional bad acting? What do you guys think? Or do you not even think it's wooden?
Well, I will say that I think that Ronnie Blakely's performance is my favorite out of the entire series. And I do think it is on purpose because, she has this secret and her drinking is escalates throughout the movie as her daughter is oh, this guy is in my dreams, and she just starts drinking to she's got alcohol in the closet. It's daytime. I think there was a scene where she's at breakfast in the first 30 minutes, and it just escalates more and more, and then to the point where Nancy, Heather Langenkamp's character, comes home and there's all the bars on the windows, and she's just look, she's the menacing one. It was it's my favorite performance because it's so out there, and and almost not feeling.
Are you talking about like when she comes out like in her bathrobe?
Well, there's that scene, yeah, where she just has a straight bottle, like, yeah.
Yes, that's my favorite part of her.
Yeah, and so it's like an escalation. So I think, you know, it was a very like weird performance, and I think it was, and that's what I liked about it. And also the ending of it is so like it doesn't really make sense, but it's so odd. And I was kind of disappointed that, to my knowledge, I didn't see Ronnie Blakely come back in any of the other movies, though she's mentioned a couple times. But
all right, in my opinion, Kent, it's you know how they say "show don't tell."
Sure.
It feels like they were like trying to tell somebody, okay, this is what we want you to show, but we don't want you to be like blatant and out there and over the top. And then she just wasn't able to actually do that. So that's the performance that we got.
I feel that she got way more comfortable, like, but after, like, the second half, she was way more comfortable in the alcoholic role than she was the first half to me.
And it would have made, a lot of her performance would have made sense if it was, you know, in the dream state, because then being fugue-like and fucking weird and just, like, it almost like she reacted inappropriately, you know, like stuff that should have upset her didn't upset her, and then stuff that shouldn't have upset her, like fucking set her off. But
welcome to the world of alcoholism.
Real life. Yeah, that's, you know what? Maybe she's just, you know, a type of alcoholic that I've never encountered. So, I will say this though, that the special effect when she gets pulled through the door at the end is fucking. I love how you can see like the mannequin's legs are like just fucking straight.
Oh, dude. So let's talk about the ending, because I assume, I'm sure Kevin knows, I think you know, Chris, like, there was what Wes Craven wanted, what Robert Shea wanted, and then, like, they end up with, like, some fucking thing in between, and I think we got the in-between ending.
Compromise.
Right?
Yes.
And, like, how do you guys interpret it? Do you interpret it as Nancy's dream, as Marge's dream? What the fuck was that?
Oh, it's Nancy's dream, because that's kind of like where we follow the perspective, I believe.
Yeah, because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in 3, you know, all of her friends and her mom are still dead.
Still, they also said that Marge died on the fucking couch or some shit in one of them. She died in her bed in another one.
Yeah.
The details are really great. Which, you know, in some ways makes sense. Like, there's the spooky, you know, rumor of how this lady died. So, you know, you can understand why they're kind of mixing and matching. But we do know that she did die.
Yeah, I think at one point they say she burned to death. You know, and then, you know, Nancy says, I think to Jean in 3 that, you know, no, he killed my mom. So
here's my most recent interpretation of the ending. I'm going to say that her mom didn't die at that final scene. Her mom's dead before that. If we're going to say that that's Nancy's dream, I say that everybody's already dead up to that point, including the mom. Mom died via Freddy or alcoholism. I don't know which, but I'm going to say that she's dead long before her mannequin gets pulled through the window in the
burning, the Freddy Krueger on top of her in the burning bed, right? Or Freddy's burning on the bed, he gets sunken in. Yeah, that makes sense. But they did say that in 2 that she died in the living room, so I assume that that's kind of where she died, was when she got pulled through the... But you make a good point. I don't think it makes sense. I was trying to do that for a while, but like watching the other ones to get...
Dude, I've spent the past 20-some years or 30 years trying to make sense of that fucking ending, and I still can't.
Part of me wants to circle back to this when we get to like our final conclusions, because that I think is a good example of like... This series has got some really high highs, and it's got some really low lows.
Yes. I gotta say, one great thing I meant to say earlier about Ronnie Blakely is the line where she says, "But he can't get you now. He's dead, honey, because mommy killed him." That's a great fucking line in horror history. I don't think that gets enough credit, but that's
terrific.
A pretty bad
Favorite performance
line,
out of all of them.
I really could see like Cartman's mom saying that.
Yeah, I could. So, all right, I took a bunch of notes, and one of the notes I want to just bring out is that the song Nightmare, there's quite a few songs in the Nightmare series, at least 2 or 3, that are just strictly called Nightmare. But in part 1, the song Nightmare is performed by a group called 213. But that tickled me in a way that I was like, wait a second. That's also the name of a West Coast rap group featuring a young Snoop Dogg, Warren G, and Nate Dogg. So there are 2 groups of 213. I just felt, throwing this factoid out there for everybody.
Huh. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that one.
Well, like we weren't going to work Nate Dogg into this podcast any other way, so I had to do it then.
I mean,
take my chance.
Do you remember which movies Nightmare on My Street came out between?
I think that would have been after 4, because most people say part 4 is the most MTV nightmare ever, and if you look at the soundtrack, it adds up. So you're that's the Will Smith Jazzy.
Yeah, the Will
one,
Smith
right?
and DJ Jazzy. I'm your DJ now, Princey.
Yeah, that's 88. I mean, they're all like a year apart for the most part. But yeah, that's 88. That's probably... Because 5, they went more serious, but yeah.
That makes sense then.
So, a funny quirk. On Vudu, when you go to load up Nightmare on Elm Street, you get a picture of Jesse from part 2. They use the exact same image for part 1 and part 2.
Oh, they have a
Good
pack.
job.
It's like 1 and 2 together, so that might be... And then they have them individually, too, but...
Yes. Yeah. I have the 1 through 4 pack, but they're on SD, and then I upgraded. So yeah, I don't know what the hell they were doing.
I don't know. When I just watched it on Vudu on my phone, though, it had the different covers.
Really?
And I watched it. I watched it through yours Vudu. So,
But all right, so I'm intrigued. I'm gonna have to try it on my phone at some point. So I have another question. I have a bunch of questions because this one prompts the most questions, so I'm not going to apologize at all. The girls jump roping. We see the kids playing in girls jump roping in, I think, every single one. Do they exist in real
Dreamworld,
life,
I would
or are
think.
they only in Dreamworld?
Or at least that would be the intention of the directors.
I think it depends on the different movies, but I think there's a couple scenes in some of them, maybe even this one, where it has to be in real life because they haven't even started hitting the dreams yet.
And the way that some of the actors look at them, it's very conflicting because all this time, up till this most recent binge watch, I was always like they're just part of the dream world. But now I'm like, I was observing like how actors were looking at them like, I think there might be some real ones, and most are dream, but I think there are some real ones. And my other question related to the kids, are they actually singing? Because very rarely, if you look at their lips, they're not singing at all.
Yeah, I would.
It's like the soundtrack that Freddy uses to scare people in the nightmares. I guess is more the question. Are they singing, or is it like Freddy's soundtrack?
I think it's them actually singing. I mean, except for the ones where it's in the dream and it's part of the soundtrack. But I mean, there's people who reference it outside of the dream, as this nursery rhyme about Freddy. I mean, for sure in 6 and maybe 4, I think.
3 it's referenced.
Yeah.
Obviously. So, yeah, okay. Kevin, you said they were all just Dream, right?
Well, I feel, yeah, or it's like I guess like a cinematic device. I don't want to jump through some of the movie because, there is parts of it where it's the end of the movie and they're not dreaming or like Freddy Krueger died. So I don't really take it as, or even in the first one, if they had their original ending where it was like a happy ending, it was supposed to be the girls jump roping at the end. And I think that was just to like let you know that like Freddy Krueger is still like out there. Like there's still, so, I mean, I don't really know. Like, with this entire series, it's like you kind of got to like pay attention to it to know what's going on. But if you like focus too much on it, then it makes no sense at all.
Oh yeah. No, there's
and it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
It's a mind fuck, but it's a lot of fun. All right, my next question. In the 80s, did every single person that wore a leather coat also have a switchblade?
Did they all in this?
Like
in real life?
I don't really.
Horror movie.
Yeah,
or in every movie.
Maybe in movies, but in real life, like, well, I didn't get a leather coat until I was in the 90s, but I never owned a switchblade. So, I mean,
I'm just talking about movies, quite frankly. Like horror movies. Just horror movies. I feel like every 80s horror movie, if there's a dude, especially a dude with a black leather jacket, he has a switchblade.
I mean, yeah.
It's very tropey.
Or punks. Any movie that has a punk in it, like in the 80s.
Yeah.
I think Star Trek has one where they go to like New York and yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was Star Trek 4. We're looking for a vessel. Shit, yeah, I mean, think about that scene in Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a knife. No, that's a knife.
All right.
Here's a question for you guys.
All right.
How would you quantify the deaths in this one?
What do you mean?
Like, how would you compare them to the ones in the other series, the rest of the series?
You have...
Well, Tina
Kevin,
is
you
the
go
first,
ahead.
right?
Yeah, Tina's the first.
Oh, that one's pretty good. And it's like recreated a couple different times later on. Or at least once. Yeah, that one's pretty good. And the whole like, I had no idea that they did the movie magic of it with the revolving room that like spun around. So she like gets on the ceiling. And that makes me even more impressed with it. But yeah, I thought that one was really cool. The jail scene hanging one. I mean, that's a little cheesy, but that as a kid that was pretty creepy to me. But and Johnny Depp, the blood coming out, that freaked me out. And also so when I saw that, I knew Johnny Depp from 21 Jump Street, which I loved. So I never expected to see him die or like, and I didn't even want to believe
Tom Hansen get fucking murked in like the first, well, I guess 3/4 of the movie.
Oh, all the blood and yeah. So that really messed with me as a kid a lot. Now, I mean, it's just cool. I liked it. It was, and then we'll say at least in a dream sequence that Ronnie Blakely dies. The fire with Freddy Krueger on fire on her, like going into the bed, was much cooler than the Carrie gag. The thing every horror movie had to do since Carrie. But that's my take.
I would say Tina's death is in the pantheon, arguably like 10 most famous slasher deaths of all time, death scenes. So, I mean, that's far above anything else that's in the movie, and it's the first one, which I think is a good decision, obviously. Rod's was, Kevin kind of said it, like, it was cool, like, when you're a kid, but as an adult, it's a little bit more... it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, how the hell did the cops possibly explain how the hell he did that? Like, there's some deaths that I will definitely bring up later on that you sit there and you have to go and say, if you were looking at this in a real life scenario, how the hell are you explaining this particular death? So Rod's was cool when younger, but now it's just silly. And Depp's was just visually appealing, but it kind of lacked substance for me. And Ronnie Blakely's is the first aspect of it's cool. The second aspect couldn't be more cheesy, but it's actually way more memorable. So I don't know. If I had to pick one, I would actually go with Blakely's second death as opposed to her first one, quite frankly, because it's so memorable for being so cheesy.
My big question about Glenn's death is, like, the cops are like, oh man, I've never seen anything like that. I want to be like, there's no body. Like, yeah, of course, all you see is blood. Like, what are you guys fucking thinking happened to this kid in his bed?
There's 4 times the amount of human blood in this room, and no, you haven't seen that? Because how did this one teenage boy have that much blood?
Not only that, but, like, did somebody throw, like, a fucking giant-sized blender under his bed? I mean, like what happened to get rid of all of the actual, like, mass of, bone and flesh and hair?
There's a giant hole in the bed, too, when they're, like, coming to the house, right? Like, there's, it's not just, like...
Yeah, it was still there.
Well, I mean, it's, before they had forensic files and Ohio cops in the 80s, I guess. So I think I give it a pass.
I mean, one thing I want to bring up, and I heard this, and it wasn't about movies, it was about books, but it relates really well, is that the first part of any series isn't really a part of the series, because, like, this one, for example, they could do whatever, they weren't beholden to canon or what had come before, or they didn't have to try to worry about continuity because, when they were originally making it, they didn't know that it was going to become, an 8-9 movie series. Whereas, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, they have to look back at what's come before and
they have to
possibly somehow try to fit that within there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good call. Here's a question. If Nancy doesn't have the crucifix in the very beginning when Freddy's, like, kind of coming through the wall, that scene, is it possible that Nancy would have been the first victim?
That's in Tina's bedroom, right?
Yeah, before Tina gets got. Like, Freddy's kind of, like, pushing through, and, Nancy just, like, seconds ago had grabbed the crucifix. And I don't know, it's just like, did that make any impact whatsoever?
I mean, I really don't think so, because I don't see him being stopped by holy ground,
I didn't see him being stopped by a mirror because he was in fucking mirrors in part 3, but by the time we get to part 4, he's stopped by a fucking mirror, so...
Yeah, I don't know.
But with that being said, alright. Here's a tidbit I noticed. When Nancy comes down for breakfast, sees the news thing on Tina, like, they show Tina in the body bag, and her arm just flops out of the body bag, which, you would never see that in the news. But then... they basically recreate that when they do the infamous hallway scene. Tina's getting dragged, and all of a sudden her arm flops out of the freaking body bag again. And I was like, I never noticed that they did that twice in the same movie, but it was kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
Like,
good notice.
There's weird things that are going on in this movie that if you sit there and really analyze it, there's a lot of... I mean, all right, how are the cops going to explain Rod perfectly slashing Tina when he has just one blade, when clearly it's 4 blades happening all at the same time, perfectly symmetrical? I mean, Rod doesn't strike me as a guy that's very precise.
I mean,
So.
all it would take would be Dexter to figure out that, like, the blood spatter in no way was coming because he was slashing her. But,
yeah. Well, I mean,
84 Ohio.
And also, it's like the premise
like
is that, like,
why?
adults are kind of like the idiots because they're the ones that don't believe any of the kids that any of this is real, even though they kind of, and like, you know, at least for the parents, they like do know that there is something to it. There is a Freddy Krueger.
Oh, you mean like 6 of you are all having dreams about the same burn-ass fucking serial killer that we murdered, 18 years ago? Oh, no, that's not gonna happen. That's not real. You're just...
No.
Here, we're gonna fucking...
Ruining my life.
That's right. Did anybody notice that, so when Nancy goes to visit Rod, the police, they gave him a shirt to wear, but they never bothered to wash the blood off his fist.
Didn't notice.
So clearly he got washed up, but he still has bloody fist. It's just a weird thing. I don't know. Alright, Evil Dead. I mean, I'm guessing you both know that it was Evil Dead that was on TV that Nancy was watching. Back then, is that even possible? Would Evil Dead have been on TV? It came out in 81, and this movie was made in 83 or 84. It came out in 84, so,
Probably 83.
So, would that even
I think
been
HBO
on
was a
TV
thing.
then?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would have been on HBO.
Okay.
Maybe on, like, late-night cable kind of stuff. Edited.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, back then it seemed like it took much longer for, like, a movie from theater to hit TV than nowadays it seems like, that can happen within a year, but I don't know, it felt like it took a lot longer when I was a kid, but maybe I was a very impatient child.
Well, it definitely took longer. I mean, because that was even before... Well, I guess it wasn't before video, but, video used to have, I think, a 9-month, 6-month minimum, something like that. And, that was one of the big arguments that, like, they were making during the COVID thing. Like, Tom Cruise was finding to keep the window, longer for theatrical releases versus, I think 90 days is typically what it is now. And they were pushing for, 60 kind of just recently.
Yeah, that was a big thing. Go back to what we were just talking about, how the parents knew and stuff. I like that, like, Nancy's parents know about Freddy. They know, like, what their daughter's describing. They're still like, no, you really need to go to the sleep study. That's what's going to fix you. Right? I don't understand, like, at that point, I don't know. Would you go through all of that just to... I don't even think it's playing dumb. I think it's just
denial is like a really,
point,
is a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
It's like not even like there's like a fine line between like lying or like being in denial of something.
Yeah.
It would be one thing if it was one of those movies where, like, the parents were typically innocent and they just had no clue what was going on. Then, yes, sending your kids to a sleep study makes sense. But when you're having... And I guess not so much in this one because Nancy's really the only one we see talking to the adults. But, further on, especially in, like, 3, 4, and 5, when people know, that this is a multiple, delusion, whatever you want to call it, happening to multiple kids who are all describing the same thing. And then there are people who know that this, person actually existed, was murdered, never brought to justice. Like, it stretches your mind past the belief that people could just write this off as, something going on. Like, especially in 3, all Nancy would have to do would be to show them the fucking newspaper articles and be like, how do these kids know about this fucking real person who existed and they're all having dreams about the same fucking person?
Right. So at the sleep study, am I the only one that was sitting there going, if that nurse or, like, doctor went home, like, what they just witnessed, because they know nothing else. They just know this girl comes in with some sleep issues. She just went way off the radar because they said 5 or 6 was a little wacky. She rated a fucking 30 towards the end. But when she walks in, she has normal hair. She walks away with gray hair, a nasty cut on her arm, and she came out of a dream holding a fucking hat.
Yeah, I mean,
like we could do this with all of them, but it is. Don't they just kind of like cut right after that? Like she wakes up with the hat, and then it just kind of like cuts to a different scene, so that you don't think about it for too long.
Yeah, it just cracks me up just thinking. I don't know, like, all right, Nancy fucking went all Home Alone, pre-Home Alone, but like. All right, you're going to set up a bunch of booby traps while you have a drunk-ass mom, and you're not at all afraid that your drunk-ass mom ain't going to stumble on something and kill herself. And we have to remember that she yelled to her dad at 12:10 to break down the door in 20 minutes. She, in the next 10 minutes, talked to her mom, had a conversation with her mom, and set up all those booby traps, then set her alarm for 10 minutes. So she did a lot of things in 10 minutes. They did not think that one at all through because...
Well, maybe Nancy grows up after she dies in part 3 to be the collector. And that can explain how she can set up so much fucking shit.
I would absolutely love that if somehow they tied that together in some immaculate way. I would be super fucking pumped.
Like Nancy's psychological disturbances from Freddy attacking her over the years turn her into a serial killer who goes around setting booby traps at people's house.
And maybe that is actually how her mom died, like the exploding light bulb in the living room.
Yeah, like
catching on fire.
You could have a lot of fun with it. I don't know. There's a lot of funny things. Plus, I mean, not to even mention like all the mistakes. There's a lot of mistakes. I think my favorite one is seeing the crash pad when Nancy goes jumping out and she lands like in the bushes, and you can clearly see the pad that she lands on, or like the coffee pot, all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of funny little ones in this. I don't know. There's just here's the all right. All overall, since I know we're dragging on, like. I want to ask, is this a good movie? I don't even think this is that good of a movie. It's just an enjoyable as fuck movie. If this was the only movie, though, like if they never did a franchise, would this movie be remembered nearly as fondly, do you think?
I really do, because the idea is probably one of the most compelling ideas in horror that you can come up with, I think.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. With the one place, that you're not safe is your dreams, and that's like the place that you feel safest is when you're asleep, or I feel for most of my life.
And I mean, to go along with that, the fact that, even though it's teenagers and most of them, the fact that he victimizes children rather than adults, that's another big, no that you typically don't see. I mean, even though these are, like I said, teenagers, it's implied, especially later on, in part 6, especially, that he kills kids too all the fucking time. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we will break it here to help smooth out the podcast integration, and we will be back with episode 40, part 2, talking about Freddy's Revenge, Nightmare on Elm Street, part 2.